Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam. I'm your host, Beth Stallwood, founder of Create WorkJoy. In this episode, I am joined by the fantastic Jules Parke-Robinson. Jules spent many years as senior roles in leadership in the army and is now on what we're calling a career adventure, having left the army 2 years ago. And she's also got a fantastic non-executive director role as the chair of British Wheelchair Basketball. So we explore different things like transitions and changing your identity because you've been somewhere for so long and what that is like, as well as thinking about how doing things outside of your, we'll call it a day job for now, doing that volunteering, thinking about the things that you're passionate about can make a real difference to your work joy. I really hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam. Today I am joined by the wonderful Jules Parke-Robinson, and we have so many different things that we're going to talk about today. So before I introduce Jules, because she'll do it so much better herself, Jules, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like the who you are, where you came from, of Blind Date, Stella Black-ing, and how you got to where you are today?
Thanks, Beth. And sadly, I do remember that, actually.
I know. We're old enough.
Well, delighted to be here. So a little bit more about me. I was born in Abergavenny, so I have a proud Welsh heritage. But I then grew up in Birmingham before returning back to Wales to study later on, where I read international politics at Aberystwyth, and then stayed for an extra year to do international history. There's a reason behind that, which was that I was wanting to stay for another year to play rugby, and that was my way around it, a justification for staying for another year. So I decided that I wanted to join the army at quite a young age. I was about 15. And I was lucky enough to go through a sixth form scholarship scheme, which meant that I had a place to join from the age of 16. But I finally went to Sandhurst when I was 23 and commissioned into the Royal Military Police. Initially, my career took me out to Germany for 6 years. It included operations in Kosovo, which was where I met my husband, Iraq and Afghanistan, as you would imagine. And lots of highlights during that career, including leading the largest deployment of the Special Investigation Branch since World War II. When I went to Iraq in 2003, I instructed at Sandhurst and then led the Tri-Service Police collaboration with the Metropolitan Police on Op Olympics during London 2012. And then I suppose the key one for me, which would be commanding the Special Investigation Branch, which had global responsibility for the investigation of serious incidents and crime involving military personnel. So I got really interested, obviously, from the whole of the justice system, from investigation through to detention, and I decided that I was going to do my law degree part-time. I famously did my finals in a porter cabin in Camp Bastion in Afghanistan. And then I spent several years volunteering with my local prison. I think for me, sport has heavily featured throughout. Hockey when I was much younger as a schoolgirl, and then I found rugby when I was at university. And I was very fortunate, right place, right time, and having been born in Abergavenny meant that I could represent Wales and played in the Rugby World Cup in 1998. And then when I had to retire from rugby, I sort of discovered I needed something else that was physical. So I did obstacle course racing and then decided to start martial arts, so taekwondo and Korean kickboxing when I was about 40. And having had 20 fantastic years in the army, I chose to leave in 2019. So I'm now a very proud veteran. I do some work as a reservist. And outside of that, I'm doing a number of different things. Most notably, I'm currently working for Amazon as an operations manager. But also one of the things that brings me work joy is I'm chair of British Wheelchair Basketball, which with the Paralympics coming up this summer is something that I'm not only very proud of, but very excited about too.
So that was a very quick introduction to a very interesting, detailed career. And one of the things I'm really interested in, because a lot of people don't have this, and tell me a little bit more about this, but you kind of knew when you were 16ish that you wanted to be in the army. And so many people who I speak to have no idea at that point in time and really kind of are out there discovering things. What was it that made you clear that that was a career path for you?
It's fascinating actually, because I my uncle was in the Navy, but other than that, didn't really have a huge family history in the military. But we went to a careers fair for my elder sister, who's a couple of years older than me. So I would have been about 15. She was obviously doing her A levels at that time and looking for what she was going to do later on. And I saw this recruiting stand for the forces. Um, and I just always knew that I wanted a job that was outside. I didn't want to sit behind a desk. I wanted to be active. My eyesight wasn't good enough to fly. I'm not very good with water. So the Navy, yeah, I know. I famously, every time I drive across the Severn Bridge, have to do it with the car window open in case of plunge off the side, which is ridiculous because I think that it wouldn't make a huge amount of difference whether or not, but it's just become a ridiculous family story now. And so that left me with the army, and I met this incredible female officer who basically said, "Yeah, this is what I do, and I spend lots of time skiing, and I do this, and I do the other thing." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll have a bit of that." So that's what persuaded me to join. And my parents, I think, were a little bit shocked. And when this opportunity came up, she said, "Well, you can apply for this scheme." And they went, "Yeah, great, do it." And so I decided, yeah, I had all my interviews and selection process at the age of 16, which in hindsight now, 30 years on, is it's quite scary. I can't imagine necessarily knowing that I really wanted to do that at 16. I knew that I wanted to join the army. I didn't necessarily know that I want what I wanted to do in it. That didn't become clear to me, I think, until I went to Santos, because I didn't really know what the options were at that stage, to be honest. Um, so it opened up my eyes to different things. But I was fortunate then that I had this time period where I could do other things and I didn't have to go until I was at that stage probably 25. So it gave me the freedom within that period to explore a little bit and do some other things and
Yeah.
at university a bit longer and play the rugby and make the most of that opportunity.
Yeah. And I was also fascinated and wanted to giggle a little bit about the fact of how quickly you rushed over the point that you played in the Rugby World Cup. And how it was just like, yeah, I just played in the Rugby World Cup as if it was just absolutely nothing. Tell us about, because obviously sport has played a big part, as you said, in your career. And that's a really interesting thing. You did that. And yeah, how was it for you?
Well, it's interesting because I always I was a late comer, I suppose, but in those days that was quite normal because girls didn't play, at school in the way that they do now. We just didn't have that opportunity. It's certainly not something that was done at my school. It was kind of hockey or netball and then tennis in the summer. Um, and I went to university and found a culture in other sports that I wasn't really keen on. And the attitude within the rugby club was it was the men and the women together. It was one club. We supported each other, and I really liked the environment. And I just, felt that anyone was welcome, and you could just come along and give it a go. And I've always been a relatively large individual, so at those stages, I think it was necessarily more brawn than skill. But I was just in the right place at the right time, but really, really loved it. And I think um, what the army allowed me to do was to have that opportunity to carry on playing. And I was lucky captain the army side for 5 years, and then played combined services. And those leadership opportunities to be the captain of the army side, and to take those values that I have onto the pitch and then use that outside as well. A real learning and development opportunity for me. And I always maintained that I was a much worse player when I was the captain. It was because my head was always thinking about other things. But they needed me on the pitch for my organisation of other people, my motivation of other people. And I think, that probably stands true today in all the other things that I do as well. As an individual, I may not be the one with the most skill, but what I can do is I can bring people together and team cohesion is one of the things that I really pride myself on, that I can bring together a disparate group of people, give them a purpose, and then send them off in a direction where they can become a really high performing team.
So it's almost like that's been your thing. That's the thing that unites what you do in your work and what you do in sports is bringing people together.
Yeah, it's a theme that runs all the way through, actually. And for me now, having left the army after 20 years, it's finding those opportunities of where can I use that skill to best effect. And, that allows me to give back as well. For me, that's really important to be having been in a public sector role for 20 plus years, to feel that I can still add value and contribute in that way. And BWB has really given me that opportunity.
I love it. I'm going to talk about BWB in a little bit and talk a bit about, leading sport and all the amazing things that can do. And there's also another theme that I was just picking out from what you were telling us there in your career, is that you seem to be somebody who never wants to stop learning. And I was noticing that the idea of you taking your exams in a porter cabin in Camp Bastion, like I can picture it in my head right now. What is it within yourself? What do you do? Because so many people find this really hard, is that continuous learning and finding the time and headspace to make it happen. And there's a little bit of me that thinks if you can make it happen whilst you're on tour at Camp Bastion taking your exams, then for the rest of us mere mortals, there probably isn't much of an excuse not to do some L&D stuff, right?
Yeah, well, that story gets worse actually, Beth, because I started doing my law degree on maternity leave.
Right.
As I had this newborn baby that kind of slept, and I was like, oh, okay, that's great. And then I realised that was the honeymoon period for about the first 3 weeks, and then he didn't sleep quite. At which stage I was committed. And I think, I suppose, I put it into perspective, in being in a military family, in a military sort of partnership, I did spend a lot of time in a house on my own where my husband and I weren't always co-located. And so when you've got kids, you're not really a social animal in the evening. By the time they've gone to bed, what else are you going to do? You can sit and watch the television, or you can do something useful with your time. And I think there's a balance, and there's a need for both. You need to have time to switch off and decompress, but also I just always want to learn. So yeah, that was the third degree, and then I just started doing another master's degree in international human rights because I was trying to work out what was the next thing.
So 3 degrees were not enough for you. You needed to go to the 4 degrees.
To the fourth, yeah, I know, which is slightly ridiculous, and I think my family that I haven't told about it yet, when they hear this, will be aghast and probably a little bit frustrated. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I had to do it. But I just think for me, I just like having knowledge, and that's not to appear clever, but I just think there's something really interesting about learning new things, because we can all. Another aspect that really comes to me, and I love mentoring, and I mentor a number of young women in particular. But also one of the things we've been talking about as a board is, we think we know things because we're a certain age, but where are we taking those information feeds from? And actually, what can we learn from people who aren't of our generation? And I'm really keen to understand, I like to think I'm cool and down with the kids. But I'm not. I'm in my mid-40s. I don't know what it feels like to be a 30-year-old or a 20-year-old in the workplace or in a sporting environment unless they tell me, because I can't experience that myself. And so actually any opportunity you can get to learn new things means that you can pick up snippets of information that you can use in a different environment. It's not just about I want to learn about this subject. What does that mechanism of actually applying myself to something? And there's a discipline to that as well. And I've been famously known to say there's 24 hours in the day. So what's your excuse for not doing something?
Sleeping?
Yes, I know. And it has come back to bite me in the last 12 months. And we will talk about that later. But, there is that balance, isn't there, between prioritising a bit of self-care and a bit of sleep versus actually, this is really interesting. And I've to be honest, I've only really picked things that I'm interested in. I struggle to apply myself to learn something if I think that I can do it, if I think it's going to add value, but I can't do it if I'm just thinking, actually, I'm really not interested in that. I'm doing it because I have to.
So it's a choice-based thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And before we go on to talk about leaving the army and to talk about the other things you've been doing and like the transition, etc., Your job in the army, leading globally the Royal Military Police, having many people under your command in that zone. So there's a few things that spring to my mind. I'll get to a question in a second. Just wait for it. So the things that come to my mind is there's a lot of people involved in that. It's a very serious subject because the stuff you're working on is serious. There are obviously kind of very big risks and issues, and you're sometimes doing this in war zones and in really difficult circumstances. And there could be some people out there, including myself, who sit there and think, blimey, how do you find some work joy when there is all of those difficult, challenging things coming? So, if you could put yourself back in a time machine to the times when you were in that zone, how did you manage to create some work joy for yourself and for the people in your command when you were doing that really challenging work?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question.
I know.
Thanks.
It wasn't supposed to be easy, was it?
I think, okay, so there's a number of things. So firstly, yes, we dealt with some really difficult things, some really unpleasant things. And in some ways, those are the ones where you're able to get really motivated to do a good job because there's a victim at the end of that. Or it could be that there's a victim's family and you want answers, you want the truth, you want them to have a degree of closure. So that really does, motivate not only me, but a team. So I think, for me, that is really important. But I think broader than that, it's about watching other people learn and grow and develop and achieve their own successes, achieve their own level of confidence. That any any leader in any environment is going to take work joy from that. Um, and I think one of the things we had to be really careful of was that how do we make it okay for people to be vulnerable? How do we make it okay for us to? You can't normalize some of the things that people are doing, but what you can normalize is some of their routine and teach them the coping strategies to deal with some of the issues that they're facing and become more resilient. Um, and so I think providing people with um, that opportunity and those experiences is really important. But that only really comes if you've got a really clear mission statement that everyone is bought into, that there's a vision of where you're going. People understand what their priorities are that sit within that. And therefore, you have effectively a unifying purpose that everyone can get behind. So people are really driven and really focused because they have to be. But that absolutely can give work joy.
It's really interesting as well because everything you talked about there is not anything that's just limited to the military place, is it? It's
No.
getting people behind what you're trying to do, behind the purpose. I love what you talk about there is the stuff that you can't normalize. What's the routine that's wrapped around it so that life seems normal as it can be? I think that's really interesting, and that those coping strategies. There will be people out there in the world doing lots and lots of different jobs here, right, who are listening in and going, okay, how does that apply to my world? And I think it is easily applied, isn't it? It's what do you have in your life, not just in your work, that makes you feel resilient, that makes you feel like you're able to cope with stuff, that makes you feel able to get on with the tough stuff when it comes, so that you can feel the joy of the result of that, or you can feel connected to the purpose. It's really good that it's not just there's not a special military source here. It is a
No.
really good leadership and thinking about how do you bring people together with that one purpose.
And some of it can be on such a basic level, can't it? It's, what are those foundations or the building blocks in terms of, health, in terms of exercise, in terms of fresh air, in terms of food, in terms of sleep, all those things that, certainly during the pandemic have really come to the fore for people, that they become more important than ever. To actually sort of normalise that, but also recognising that I would imagine for a large swathe of the population, they aren't necessarily in a job that brings them work joy all the time, if at all. So how do you then understand what that joy is in the wider parts of your life? So if you're in a job that is not necessarily fulfilling you, how can you what makes you tick, and how can you add that fulfillment in other ways?
Yeah. And it's one thing that I always say about WorkJoy is this isn't about finding joy 100% of the time. There are always going to be bits of your working life that are slightly frustrating or that you don't want to do, because there's no such thing as the perfect job. That's my opinion on it. And if anyone has found the perfect job where they never have to, do the stuff they don't like, I'm well impressed. But it is about, sometimes it's about knowing that, and I really believe in tracking it and understanding what it is that brings you joy and doing more of that stuff, and then making decisions about careers, about, is this what you want to keep doing, or do you want to change what you're doing? Is it enough for you? Is it too much for you? And kind of really calibrating where you're at. And that's where I'm going to lead us nicely in now. So after a 20-year career, you decided to leave the army and to go exploring on different things. So this is a big transition, right? From military life, very structured, very much a part of how you live your life as well as the work. And tell us a little bit more about the transition that you're in.
Oh, I'm glad you said in, because it's not over. And I've my last day in uniform was July 19, so we're 2 years into it, and it was a huge decision for me to leave, and a very difficult one, but one that I was really confident about, in the sense that I knew that I'd almost had such a good time and achieved everything that I wanted to achieve, that I felt that if I stayed, I would then potentially fall out of love with what I was doing, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be able to look back and say, actually, that was brilliant. I've learned a career, but actually, there's a big wide world out there, and I think, particularly in a military sort of environment, that many people will leave in their mid 50s. Wow, that's quite a hard time of life to get a job. And to start a second career. And so it was almost, if I go a bit early, then I've got a bit of a buffer in terms of time to explore a bit and find my way, and actually understand what's out there. Because let's be honest, Beth, I hadn't had a proper job.
You did have a proper job. You did have a real job.
No, I meant
It's
before.
just in a very specific world, right? Which is an all-encompassing world.
Yeah, and it is, it is vocational. I believe it is, and if it was just a job, people wouldn't do it, would they? It's much more than that. It means much more than that, and therefore the transition is much more difficult. And I liken it often to athletes when they retire from sport, and I've described it on a number of occasions as you're part of a club and you wear a uniform, and then suddenly you take that uniform off and no one knows who you are anymore, and have completely lost your identity. And that wasn't to say that being in the army defined me, but I guess, if I'm honest, it probably did. That's who I thought I was. I was this rank, as I went through, and it wasn't about, well, who is me? Who's the person underneath? What do they stand for? What are their values? And actually, what do they want to do? What can they do? And trying to unpick all that is really hard. And then you get chucked into a pandemic.
Just to make it slightly easier.
But in a way, do you know what? It's been a fascinating 2 years, because I've learned so much about myself. I've learned so much about where I think I'm resilient, and perhaps where I wasn't as resilient as I thought I was, what I really perhaps hold most dear, what I will tolerate and what I won't, and where I want to be. Um, what I'm still not necessarily clear on is, what are those stepping stones to get to that point? Um, but that's work in progress. And actually, I have, luckily, a little bit of time on my side to do that work, and to get some experience doing different things along the way. If you've worked for 20 years in the military and you've never worked in the corporate environment, or you've never worked in the city, or you've never worked in retail, or I just didn't have any other experiences to be able to use as a frame of reference. So I've been really fortunate to be able to do some different things and go, oh, I wonder what this is like. And in each of those experiences, I've found things that I have taken away from that, whether they're positive or negative, that help you grow and help you shape the next adventure. I'll do a bit more of that and a bit less of the other thing. So, everything. I'm sure that I've spent the last 8 months or so working nights, And I would say that that is not a young, or it is a young person's game. It's not. So, that's been I have the utmost respect for people who work nights, day in, day out, or night in, night out for years and years and years. Some people it really suits. But actually, that's been really interesting for me. It was something, despite, being in the army, other than being on exercise or on operations, I hadn't really experienced that before. And yet, lots of the people that I led did work shifts. So it was really interesting to see, how did I feel about that, and draw from those experiences, how the past and the present collide.
Yeah. It's really fascinating, and I love the way that you agree that you're kind of in this transition. I'm going to call it a career adventure because that sounds like exciting, like you're exploring all these different areas. And the thing that was coming to mind when you were talking about it is it's almost like you're a fresh graduate going out and exploring the world, but with 20 years worth of experience.
You're absolutely right. And the one thing that I suppose has been fascinating to me is how some potential employers are really interested in what you've done before and what you're capable of and what your level of experience is, and can really see the benefit in having someone who's got 20, 25 years of career behind them. Whereas others, just it is like you're joining at the graduate level, and actually everything else you've learnt before doesn't hold value for them. And so that's been a really interesting experience in itself. Because I have worked actually in the last 2 years with a number of graduates, which I find fascinating. I'm deciding that it keeps keeping me young. That's, but it's really interesting to see the job market from their perspective as well. And it's tough out there. It really is. And also, it is tough, but there's also so many options. I don't think, when I was growing up, I don't remember being faced with that wealth of choice about what you do. It was kind of, we were placed in buckets of type of activity. Whereas now, if you were to go onto one of the infamous, job search engines, I mean, where do you start?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and particularly, if you've got a degree or some, or any kind of higher education or training in a particular area that's vocational, kind of, that's really easy, isn't it? Because it channels you down there. But if you do what I did and go and do history, great. Now what? And in some ways, that's great because it gives you the freedom, but it doesn't help. If I didn't join the army at 23, I have no idea what I would have done.
Yeah, and I suppose this is that you didn't do it when you were 23, the going and exploring, because you had your career set. You knew what you were going to go and do. You were just waiting for the right time to go and do it. So it is almost like going back in time, but into a very, very different world of jobs that didn't exist 2 years ago, and careers that didn't exist 5 years ago, and new jobs and new things coming up every day. So it must be a really fascinating and, in some ways, massively scary adventure. And I just wanted to say, actually, really thank you for being so open and honest about how it's so easy, isn't it, to see the end part of a story versus the middle part, the difficult things. And it's so nice to hear people sharing that you haven't necessarily found the exact thing yet.
No, and I think when you leave the army or the military full stop, there's almost very much a focus on that resettlement activity to get you the job. And if you don't know what that job is, or you're not sure what it would be, then it's having that level of confidence to go, actually, it's okay to try different things. And gosh, it has been scary. Also, because I'm not a graduate and because I am in my mid-40s, I have responsibilities, as in, I've got a mortgage and two kids to bring up and, bills to pay. So although I do have freedom, I don't have the freedom that perhaps I might do if I was 22 and I could still live with mum and dad. And actually, my salary is great, but I'm going to buy a car with it or go on a nice holiday when we can travel again. Um, that's being really unfair. I'm not tarring all graduates with that brush. I don't mean it in a negative way, but actually, I've had to be really. I haven't had as much freedom as perhaps I would have wanted to, because there are those requirements placed upon me.
Yeah.
And that makes it a little bit, oh, okay, what am I going to do next?
Yeah, so there's some necessity there, right? There's some I can't just spend 2 years like sitting around waiting for the perfect job to come. I need to go and earn money while I do this, and I need to find a job that works for me and my family, and I need to so there. And I think this is so true. And take it out of the army context or the military context. There are many people out there who get to. I think it happens often between kind of 35 and 45. That's the experience I have with people go, this isn't the career I want anymore. And I have spent 15, 20 years building this career. And I thought that's what I wanted. But actually, the goalposts have moved and I actually want something different now. And I don't know exactly what it is, but I've got that, that kind of real inner knowing, that real feeling that this isn't what I want, but I haven't got the answer to what I do want. And that going and exploring, having a career adventure, however scary it is, actually may end you up in a really, really good place. But the idea that we just know exactly what the job is when there are so many jobs out there and so many different options, and being employed or self-employed or being an entrepreneur, that the options are almost too much to make those decisions.
I know. And I think when I sort of embarked on this adventure, I thought I would know instantly what I wanted to do. And it turned out I was completely wrong. um,
Yeah.
and at that point, then I struggled a little bit with my confidence, to be honest, because I sort of went in one direction and thought, aha, this is it. I'm all over it. And then decided that, oh, actually, maybe this isn't the right environment for me. I'm not necessarily feeling as though I'm thriving here. I'm not necessarily, one of the things I struggle with is feeling that I'm not being used to my maximum sort of capability. There's so many things that I can offer. And I suppose that goes back to my earlier comment about some employers being keen to understand what you can do and others really not necessarily taking a view. They'll mold you into their own way of thinking. But, I want to be fulfilled in what I'm doing from a work perspective. And therefore, finding that right environment and finding where I fit. I want to recreate that sense of belonging that I had when I was in uniform. And I might never find it in my working life. And therefore, how do I create that outside of my normal sort of full-time employment? How do I get that in my life?
Yeah.
Because it's really important to me.
And this is where, nice segue there, Jules, into the stuff that you do outside of your job. And obviously, big part of that is being chair of British Wheelchair Basketball. So tell us a little bit more about how that came to be.
Well, I was really fortunate to go on a leadership development course a couple of years before I left the army. And one of the other individuals on that experience was the CEO of British Wheelchair Basketball. And I'd been thinking that, when I leave the military, maybe I'll look at sort of a NED portfolio type career. And then an opportunity came up to join the board. And so I went through the application process and interviewed for that. And for me, we talked at the beginning, didn't we, how sport has been really important. It was just like everything, all the stars aligned. It was a sporting opportunity where it was a leadership role that I could be involved in. I could give something back. And, inclusivity is hugely important to me. Not only from my own personal experiences with my daughter growing up, who was born profoundly deaf, and that experience and has really shaped the way I think about us as I can't think, put my teeth back in. As a society, and
Yeah.
how we genuinely live those values every day, how to make sure that she is included in everything that she does, and given those opportunities as a young girl. But then how do we expand that and broaden that into the world of sport and life and careers in general? So, really fabulous opportunity, and to work hand in hand with Lisa as CEO, who is a huge talent, has been really, really rewarding. And particularly, we've had such a tricky 18 months, as you well know, um, trying to navigate through significant risks in terms of COVID, but then prepare for Tokyo, and all that means, and then Paris and the strategy for Paris and beyond. But wider than that, it's not just about the elite athletes, although they are a huge part of what we do. It's about how do we expand that at the grassroots level? How do we double participation in the sport? How do we give people the opportunity to have a go at British wheelchair basketball? And we've just secured a huge investment for our Inspire a Generation campaign, which is just a joy to watch people across the community becoming activators and inspiring, young people, and more senior people, that opportunity to just have a go at something that they would never have even considered before. It's hugely rewarding, and that's the bit that gives me some work joy in my life, as you can probably hear in the way that I talk about it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because the way you talk about your the kind of career side, the job side. So we'll call it your job versus your work here. So the job side is still kind of that adventure, that exploration, that not knowing, the finding out. It sounds like on this side of your life, in this bit of work, and in the WorkJoy theory of everything, work is anything that you do where you expend effort, energy, experience your skills. It's not about whether you get paid for it or not. So volunteering and doing work such as you're doing here in that kind of non-executive type role, boards and support and trustees definitely fit into WorkJoy. It's just the work that you don't necessarily get paid for. So I totally get it, but your voice lights up. That doesn't quite make sense in the but you knew what I meant, right? Is that you get some real energy behind your voice here. So it sounds like on this side of your life, you've really found the place where you can get that work joy.
Well, it's knowing that you can make a difference, and that's always such a trite thing to say, but I know that I can help. I know that I can lead, that I can bring the team together, that I can support, that I can offer advice, that I have a background in sort of strategy and governance. There's all those things that we need to help us move forward, and to take the organisation into the next 10, 15 years and beyond. How do we make BWB be a force for good outside of what people might think the narrow parameters of an NGB are? It's much bigger than that. And having that opportunity to be involved and help shape some of that is just incredible.
I love it. And for people who haven't yet been following British wheelchair basketball, I totally love it. It's such an exciting, fast-paced game. Can you tell people a bit more about it so that people understand what it is you're working for?
Well, apart from anything else, it's absolutely nails. So if you think about, and it's seriously, my background, obviously, in terms of rugby and obstacle course racing, and then martial arts. I've always been attracted to those sort of physical contact sports, and I'm lucky that I live at the moment quite close to London Titans, and I quite often, when I could, was able to go and watch them play. And you think, oh my goodness, it's just brutal. But the smiles of joy on these players' faces is just an absolute pleasure to watch. The Commonwealth Games is going to be fascinating because normally we play 5 versus 5, and for the first time we're going to be doing 3 versus 3, and so that's been a really interesting thing to see how that's progressed through. A lot of people being reluctant and thinking, oh, this isn't good for the sport, and then other people saying, well, actually, that provides us a huge opportunity about how to play differently. What skills will we learn doing 3 versus 3 that we could take into the ordinary game? We've got huge membership. Clubs all over the country, able-bodied and disabled. So there are plenty of opportunities for people to go and have a go. And if you want to get involved, look us up on the internet and inspire a generation. And there's a huge opportunity right now to be involved in this program and to give wheelchair basketball a go. And also, obviously, follow the team through the Paralympics because we have incredible men and women's team. Are going to do fabulous things. I really feel for them in terms of going to Tokyo. It's been a really tricky road to get there. But they are raring to go and they're going to do brilliant things. And I can't wait to watch them on the big screen back here.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing. This podcast will come out after they've played.
Oh,
So I'm like, oh, I really want to be able to, maybe I'll be able to come and record a little outro at the end that tells everyone how they did. But I am so excited to see where they get to and how, overcoming what has been a really tricky 18 months of training, delayed games, very different games to what they were expecting potentially because of all the regulations and who's going to be there and not going to be there is what resilience those athletes must have to be able to make that happen.
yeah. I mean, and also, how do you measure success? How do you measure success this year? Because it's so different. Yes, medals are important. That's what everybody wants. But actually, for me, the measurement of success is getting everyone there safely, getting them home safely in the current environment, and actually if they bring home anything, then that's fabulous. It's the icing on the cake. But to be honest, the achievement is getting them there and back, and giving them that opportunity and that platform to be able to, expose to everybody else what they've been working so hard for back here, in their own living rooms, in their own gardens, having to carry on training. I mean, just incredible resilience, as you can imagine.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting how obviously you talked about it's not just about the elite end of the sport, it's about inspiring people, but how when you get that amazing stuff on the TV back here, when you see people play, how much that contributes to that inspiration of not just young people, but anybody who might be interested, being able to take that and go and do something and play locally and find a team or just try it out. And it can be amazing for getting people interested, can't it?
Absolutely huge. I mean, you look at the legacy of London 2012, but if you think of sport like ours and what we're trying to achieve in terms of inclusivity, providing that opportunity for young people to play who might be you know excluded from other types of sports, giving them that opportunity to be able to do the same as everybody else. That's just fabulous to be able to think that they can have that platform to do that. And our athletes, our elite athletes, have a really huge role to play in that, and are massive role models for the next generation.
Yeah, amazing. I cannot wait. And it's only, what is it, 5 weeks away or something until it. At the time of recording, I'm definitely going to come back on and talk about what happened after this. We'll add it on at the end. So, we have been chatting for a while, and I could talk to you obviously for another 3 or 4 days. But I'm going to move us on, if it's okay, to get your quick fire question answers. Are you ready?
I am.
Right. Question one. For you as an individual, what is always guaranteed to bring you some work joy?
Being empowered in anything that I do. So not only myself, but being able to empower other people. So allowing others to earn my trust and allowing them the freedom to develop and thrive. And I think that translates across everything I've done in the military and beyond, giving people that opportunity to grow and develop. And knowing that actually as a leader, you take that responsibility, and people have to learn by making mistakes, and you protect them. You're the magnet that sits in the middle. You're the filter that sits between them and other people, and allowing them to grow. I think for me, that gives me huge word joy.
Amazing, thank you. What book are you currently reading?
I've got two. Well, actually, I've really got three, but I'm going to just go for two because I try and read something that I think, not that I ought to read, but do you know?
I know what you mean.
I normally have sort of something else on the go as well. So I don't know whether you're a Lucinda Riley fan, but I'm just finishing The Missing Sister, which is the last one of the seven sisters, which is fabulous. My mum's finished it and I haven't, which is really frustrating. But a very dear friend and a colleague from BWB also sent me recently, and I've just started reading. So I've got Captain Tom's Life Lessons, which are amazing,
Oh, yeah.
really, really good. And also You Do You by Sarah Knight. And someone who, has gone through this experience for the last 2 years. This colleague and friend of mine sort of recognised that that was a book that could probably help me and just give me that, bring your confidence to a place where actually you can do you do what you want, but actually it's just written in such a fabulous way. So I'm part way through that one as well.
Love
And
it.
depending on what mood I'm in, it would be with
And I think it's so interesting that that's the book that somebody sent you when you talked about, who are that journey of discovery. Oh, that sounds really cheesy, but just go with it.
yeah,
The discovery of who you are when you're not in a uniform. Who are you when you're not in the army? And how do you feel confident and great about that being you?
absolutely, absolutely. She knows me very well.
All right. Question 3. What's the best or most useful bit of advice that someone has given you in your life that you always come back to?
This is an easy one for me. This is my dad, and I had the same conversation with my son recently before his end of school year exams, which is read the question. But actually, it goes deeper than that, and there's something that you can use in all aspects of a problem. So my dad always used to say to me, "What are they asking you? What do they tell you? And what do you know?" And if you pull those three things together, then you can get through most problems.
I like that.
It's good, isn't it? Bless.
Yeah. And totally applicable in many, many situations, right? Is to stop and
Exactly.
just think, ask yourself
Yeah.
those questions and see where it goes from there. Love it. Great advice. What is one super practical, go and do today, tomorrow, the next day, really easy to do, bit of advice that you would give to people that would help them get more work joy?
So I would say, accept that it's not selfish to put yourself first. And I'm really bad at doing this. I know that I am.
Is this
So
like take your own advice moment?
yes, yes. However, I did last week. I I ended up declining an online session with a group of friends, um, which was actually going to be really useful, but I knew they were recording it, so it was a kind of compromise. And I had to prioritize, was I going to go to sleep or was I going to join this session, or could I watch the session back later, which wouldn't be such a immersive experience, but I would probably still get an awful lot from it. And I think it's just, yeah, don't think that it's selfish to put yourself first. Self-compassion is really, really important. And I think that, that's something I've put to the bottom of my pile over the last 2 years. And it took me getting quite poorly to actually realize that it needs to be me first. And that isn't a selfish activity, because you always say, you put your own life jacket on, don't you, before you put your kids, everyone else's on. But that is genuinely true. You can't lead other people if you're not capable of functioning yourself.
I also love that you're sharing the one thing that you're actually still trying to work on yourself, and not the one thing that you'd be going, oh yeah, I'm the expert in this. It's like, no, it's hard. I'm
Yeah,
still working on it.
yeah, because actually, I think sometimes saying no. I'm usually quite generous with my time, but working nights at the moment, sometimes I've had to say, actually, I'm really sorry, I can't do that, because if I do that, then it means I'm only going to get 3 hours sleep, and that's not fair on everyone else. Certainly not the people who have to live with me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I totally get that. So it's not, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because what we just, I've been saying this for ages, is that we need a different word for selfish. We need one that hasn't got so many negative connotations with it, because looking after yourself is the role model that you want other people to do. You want other people to be able to look after themselves. You want to be at your best. You want to be well slept, well nourished, well hydrated, well read, all of these things. And fitting all of those things into your life is actually quite hard. So you have to say no to some things, or you will not be at your best.
Absolutely, but it's really difficult to do.
So difficult in practice. Yeah, we could all do with helping each other with that one, couldn't we? Supporting each other with it. Right. Final one. Where can people find out more about you and your lovely work?
So I think from my perspective, I would want to push people towards exploring more about BWB, where they can get involved in watching British wheelchair basketball at all the different levels, where they can get involved in having a go. Please support, you will have supported, I know, the Paralympics, but actually next year's Commonwealth Games too. So
Yeah.
and it's at home, so we'll have plenty of opportunity for people to go and get involved. So
And hopefully in a world where we can all go and actually be with other human beings in a stadium and enjoy ourselves.
that would be exciting, wouldn't it?
It really would be. Jules, thank you so much for today. Thank you for coming along. It's been great to hear your story and the transition part, and thank you for being so open and vulnerable with actually the fact that it's not all there yet and you're still working through it. And I think for many people, including myself, it's really inspiring to hear the journey part of it. Again, slightly cheesy, go with it for a second, versus the here's the shiny outcome and the fact that you're still working towards some of those things. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Beth.
Well, a huge thank you to Jules for coming on this episode of the WorkJoy Jam. There are so many things that I have taken from Jules' conversation with me. And I think one of the really interesting things is about this transition around, it's not just about whether you come out of the army or it's about whether you're changing your career or you're thinking about a different role, is that sometimes, in fact, many times, many people, you don't have the exact answer. You don't know exactly what you want to be doing, but you know that you want to be doing something different to where you are now. And that restless feeling I think we sometimes get. And if you identify with that, this episode hopefully will have resonated with you. And to perhaps think about, you don't have to know the answer. You can go on a bit of an adventure. You can go and experience different things and to learn things and to try out different careers and see which one really fits you well. And that doesn't mean that you have to find something that is 100% joyful all the time. That's probably really unrealistic in the expectation. But what are the things that really light you up in an organisation? What are the things that you don't enjoy so much so that you can steer your career in the direction that you want it to go in? You can find the roles or the organisations or the type of being an entrepreneur that really, really work for you. I also think it's great the fact that Jules is talking about the things that she does outside of work and outside of the paid job, so it's still work, and her role as the chair of British wheelchair basketball and how much joy that can bring, using your skills in something that you feel really passionate about, in something where you feel you are giving back and can help other people. So a huge thank you to Jules for coming along. Do go and listen to the other episodes that we have. We are on season 3 now, so there's plenty of different people, different backgrounds, different experiences to hear about them and what they think about WorkJoy and where they would recommend you could go and have a look for some of it. And if you're keen on developing your levels of WorkJoy, if you're thinking this is something you want to spend some time working on, why not have a look at Club WorkJoy? It's our club, it's our group that are an amazing community of people who are all trying to create and cultivate more joy in their working lives and the joy in the working lives of the people around them. We have events, we have networking, we do everything online. We've got an app where you can connect and collaborate with people from different organisations, different backgrounds, different experiences. If you want to find out more, go to www.createworkjoy.com, click on Club WorkJoy and come and join this fantastic community. Thanks very much for listening.